in terms of impact to revenue, the price we sell our calves for is just as important as the number of calves we sell.
Sale day. It's that day we look forward to every year, but often we manage the least for it. Brett Crosby with Custom Ag Solutions, Dave Voth with Good Grazing Makes Sense. Join me today as we discuss the cost to our business when we don't provide the adequate time nor have the proper information like the potential future market prices before us as we make management decisions that affect the marketing of our livestock that will garner the highest net return. So to gather that future price information, Brett shares with us about beef basis.
And the tool is designed simply to forecast prices for calves.
The decisions you make are only as good as the information you have before you. So if you like to be more confident in your management decisions that affect your marketing, listen in on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills here with the Working Ranch Radio Show. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Yeah, as you heard there in the opening, we're going to be talking about a forecasting tool that helps us in making good management decisions when it comes to marketing our livestock. We'll get to that in just a few moments. But quickly, I wanted to remind you, did you have the opportunity to listen to last week's show with Wally Olson? The title of it was, What Should You Be Selling and Buying in This Market? And besides the weather and the fires in California, I think the markets are also big conversation pieces around the round tables at the sale barns or the coffee shops. My, oh my, this market just continues to move higher. So go back and listen to last week's episode. You can catch it through our podcast site at workingranchradio.com. Or if you want to try out a podcast provider, we're on pretty much anyone out there. By the way, if you are catching the show through that format, make sure you click subscribe on that, and then you'll be notified when we drop a new episode. Coming up next week, just wanted to put this out there now, Trey Wasserberger will be joining us with Sustainable Beef. That is that new packing plant that's being built in North Platte, Nebraska. We're going to be talking about that with him, so be sure to tune in next week. Also coming up here on today's show, we have with us Dan Leo with Apex Cattle talking about the subject on heterosis, some of the things that they found by using that in their cow herd, and of course their bull sale coming up the 27th of January. And of course we'll hear from the Captain Tim O'Byrne and meteorologist Don Day with that ever so vital long-term look at our long-term weather. But turning now to our subject at hand here today, joining us on the program is Brett Crosby, who's a rancher, but also president of Custom Ag Solutions. He's out of Cowley, Wyoming, and Dave Voth with Good Grazing Makes Sense, a part of an initiative with Society for Range Management. He's out of Elko, Nevada. Guys, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks for having us, Justin.
Well, Brett, I want to start with you first here today as we jump into our subject and looking at how we as ranchers can be better at marketing our product. Of course, as I was sharing with both you and Dave last week, we finally got our steers shipped and sold. And, as you come out of that, the day after, a few days after that and so forth, you're starting to put together your thoughts. You start going through, boy, I should have done this. I could have done this. Why did I do that? Various things and different things that you go through in your mind in that. And it really gets back to really, I think, the heart, as you were telling me before we talked here today, Brett, that it's that one day a year, and maybe you sell more than one day a year, but essentially you get the point that our profitability is riding on. And yet for a lot of us, it's an area that we don't spend as much time making informed decisions on that we should based upon the return on investment of that time. And we really need to be.
Absolutely. The thing that a lot of us overlook is the importance of marketing. If the price is 10% lower this year than it was last year, that's equivalent to us selling 10% fewer calves. So in terms of impact to revenue, the price we sell our calves for is just as important as the number of calves we sell. And we spend so much time keeping calves alive, keeping them healthy, making sure that we sell as many calves as possible. And then we compare that, if you compare that to how much time we spend really trying to market our calves optimally, we could really stand to spend more time paying attention to the cattle market.
Not only do we spend so much time making sure we have live calves to sell, but there's a lot of emphasis on selling the biggest calf possible. And oftentimes that's not necessarily the most profitable thing to do.
Yep, good point, Dave. I think when it comes to making management decisions, oftentimes we lack the confidence in that decision. Could be a variety of reasons for that. Maybe we're not as educated as we should be. We're not as informed as we should be. Haven't done a cost analysis, real thorough one, I should say, on where we're at on that. But I think some of that ability to be good managers is to be confident in our decisions.
You're absolutely right. Anytime you make a management decision involving how you rotate your cattle, how long you feed them, anything that impacts the weight of your calves is going to require first trying to forecast how much money it's going to cost or make you to implement that decision. And then that means that you have to understand what you should expect for prices if you do nothing, and what you should expect for prices or value per head if you implement some sort of management decision. And so forecasting those prices is key to making all of the decisions that we consider in order to increase our profitability.
Brett, what do you see are some of the management things that producers technically need to be doing as part of this marketing process?
I think the one word answer to that is flexibility, because there is opportunity to make money in the cattle market or in the cattle business in some sector almost every year. So whether you sell them off the cow, whether you wean them for 45 days and sell them, whether you wean them and then you keep them as grass cattle, or you send them to a feedlot and have them custom fed for you and sell them dead. If you have the flexibility to make those decisions in terms of marketing times and marketing weights, you have a lot more potential to increase your profitability.
You know, I think one of the things, and I'm coming to you guys here this morning a little fresh off of just selling calves, so realizing, golly, I really need to keep a better track of the weight on my steers.
Yeah, because for every pound you add to your steers, you're obviously going to add value. Now, I had someone say to me the other day, you put another 100 pounds on them and you're getting $3 a pound. Well, no, that's not quite the way it works, because we know that the heavier they are, the lower the price is. 800-pound steers right now are bringing around 265, and 5 weights are bringing in the mid threes. So, there's a 90-cent difference in price there. And that means that as you increase the weight, the price goes down. That's something that everybody understands. Everybody understands the price lag, right? That if they come in heavier, then you're gonna get a lower price than your contract was for. But then if we break that down, we look at it in dollars per head. What's a 5-weight steer at $360 going to bring me in dollars per head versus a 6-weight steer at $320? And I'm just trying to do the math real quick, but I think it's about $120 or so. So you're really only going to gain $120 for that extra 100 pounds. Understanding the value of every pound you put on them is incredibly important.
Guys, let's take a break here. When we come back, we'll talk maybe a little bit more about understanding some of the marketing aspects of it. And then basically the core of what I want to get into is really, I think for a lot of us, where we're wanting to know is there something out there that we can start to plug in some numbers and say, all right, here's what I think I'm going to have. Here's where I'm going to be at. What would these scenarios look like? So that's going to be the topic I want to get into later on in the show as well. So this segment, though, brought to you today by Safety Zone Calf Catcher. Now here's the captain, Tim Wilburn, with more.
Hey everybody, Tim here. We're fixing to come up on 1 million downloads of our Working Ranch radio show podcast, which is really exciting. And it got me to thinking about another viral moment that we had back in 2017 when we ran a short Facebook video of the Safety Zone calf catchers. And it was so popular, it got 6.8 million views in the first 5 days. I want you folks to check it out, Safety Zone calf catchers. It's a great product for all producers. Keep you safe when you're working with baby calves, especially for old timers like me who maybe can't outrun those cows anymore. Check them out, Safety Zone Calf Catchers.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone Calf Catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone Calf Catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
Just to reintroduce our guest joining us on the program today, Brett Crosby, who's a rancher and also president of Custom Ag Solutions. He's out of Cowley, Wyoming, and Dave Voth, who has joined us before on the program back in episode 112. Dave joined us to talk about the Good Grazing Makes Sense initiative, the things that they're doing there, and the tool that is for us as ranchers when it comes to stewardship and land management. Also, he was with us this last summer, episode 175, talking about some apps out there that can be used as well. The title of that show was There's an App for That. So Dave is joining us as well. He is out of Elko, Nevada. Guys, I want to get back into, and Brett, I'll probably go with you on this one, talking about some of the markets. Before we get into talking about the tool that you've developed there that we can utilize to help us in forecasting prices with our products, with our calves or whatever type of class animal that we've got there. Before we get into that, let's just kind of back up and get to some basics, terminology and understanding and how some things work. And that is really kind of with the markets and the futures. Now, I know for folks listening, it's probably pretty rote. You understand some elements of this, but for others, it may not. So I think in order so we can all be on the same playing field and the same basis on everything, let's talk about just some basics when it comes to marketing, some terminologies, and how the futures work.
You bet. There's a lot of terms when you get into marketing and you talk to people who are conversant with the cattle markets that are just foreign to most of us ranchers. You start talking to someone who's trading the cattle market every day and they start talking about long positions, short positions, a straddle, strangle, and you just get overwhelmed. And the two things we need to understand: what can I expect my calf prices to be given the current futures market? And what can I expect that price to be if I change some sort of management strategy? So that comes down to basis. And basis is really simple. The heavier the calf, the lower the price. We all understand that from price slides. So when we talk about basis, we're talking about it relative to the feeder cattle futures. So it's the difference between the futures market, with January today is trading somewhere around 268, and the actual price in the sale barn for a particular calf. So if a calf runs through the sale barn today at 368, then the basis is $1 over the board, is what we call it. That's just a different way of using the price slide or defining the price slide. So if we can understand what the basis or the difference between the futures and the price we receive is going to be, we can forecast prices going out as far as the futures go out. So, for example, November futures are trading at 267, and we can expect $1 basis. Then that means November calves at 500 pounds are 367. So that is how we define basis. And let me back up for just a second to help people understand what the futures really represent. The futures represent the market's best guess of what an 800-pound steer is going to be worth of that trading month. So when I just said November futures, it's people guessing or speculating or hedging or whatever on the value of an 800-pound steer in a 12-state area that is defined by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that comprises what they call the feeder cattle index. So whatever the index settles at is what the November futures will wind up being when that contract closes. And the feeder cattle index it's the weighted average 7-day weighted average price of steers weighing 700 to 900 pounds, so around 800 pounds in that 12-state area that goes down from Montana, North Dakota, down through Texas. And so when we talk about the futures, we're talking about what people think the index or 800-pound steers are going to be worth when that contract closes. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about basis, we're talking about the price difference between the futures and what we receive at the sale barn. And that in turn goes back to the price difference between an 800-pound steer and whatever you're selling in the sale barn, a 500-pound heifer, 600-pound steer, or whatever.
Okay, so that kind of sets our basis. Not to use the word basis over and over here, but I keep using that word. I noticed when I went to that, when I saved you that question. But so we got the foundation, I should say, for what this is all at. Now let's get into the tool. And you were telling me before we went on air here that you used to have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of trying to figure this all out. And you said, man, there's got to be an easier way. So I want to talk about beef basis because that is a tool that I see. In fact, before we went on here, we were kind of going through a scenario with my calves and looking at this next year, some things like that. So let's talk about this tool. It's called beef basis, and I'll have you just kind of start out intro what it is and then we'll get into some questions as we go.
Yeah, beefbasis.com is our website, and the tool is designed simply to forecast prices for calves at various weights, sold at various locations across the country at a certain date and time. So, for example, what are my 4-weight heifers going to be worth October 1st? Or what are my 6-weight steers going to be worth on January 30th? That's the underlying driver for everything on beef basis. It's designed to forecast calf prices. And as we know, calf prices are different from the futures market because of basis. Mm-hmm. So in 2006, we contacted the guys at K-State University, Kevin DeVetter and Jim Minter were there at the time, who had done a lot of basis research. And we said, hey, I think there's a better way to forecast basis than just the 3-year average. Let's look at it in terms of the impact of the cost of gain being corn on calf prices, which are directly related to the feeder cattle futures. And so the primary inputs there are feeder cattle futures and corn prices.
Mm-hmm. So the information that you are able to base this off of would be those sale barns that do report to the USDA?
That's correct. And we have a feed that comes directly from the Ag Marketing Service that collects every transaction and every report from every sale barn in the country. And when we first designed these forecasts, in order to make them statistically reliable, we needed at least 10 years of data from AMS. So there are a lot of locations that didn't have 10 years of data. And then later on, when 2014 spiked and we saw that there had been a fundamental shift in the market, we ran the models again and we have those up. We're not completely done with putting those models up because each one takes hours and hours and hours of time, and we're not getting paid for it anymore. So it just takes some time to get it up there.
Yeah. Let's take another break here because when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about where some of this data is derived from and then also just how it can be used. We're getting knowledge and information several months ahead so we can start to make decisions, and that being really the crux, I think, of the point of this all is that if we know information several months in advance, we can start to make good management decisions based upon that. So we'll get into that when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. But this segment today brought to you by Apex Cattle's Heterosis Headquarters annual bull and female sale. Now that's coming up. Mark your calendar for Monday, January 27th. That'll be at the Apex Cattle Sale Headquarters in Dannenbrog, Nebraska. But talking with with Dan Leo on that. He's really pleased with what they have this year. Nearly 300 head of outstanding Sim-Angus cattle, some very powerful 2-year-old bulls, plus some exciting new generation yearling bulls, all these with exceptional EPDs set for cavities, performance, maternal, and carcass genetics, sired by some of the industry's leaders when it comes to productive Angus and Sim-Angus dams. Apex bulls bred, developed for longevity, good feet, and soundness. And here's another thing, those aged bulls, aged advantage bulls, not a grain in that ration. And I think that speaks for itself in terms of where Dan wants to see these bulls last and the longevity in your cow herd. Also, of course, it is a female sale, so they've got a really good set. In fact, I think Dan was telling me about 115 head of Sim-Angus bred heifers, bred to proven cavities, low birth weight sires. New this year, they're also going to be selling some elite open heifers and a few fall calf pairs as well. It's all about heterosis, and one thing you can count on in the industry, if you're in the cow-calf business, heterosis is one of the things that's free, and there's not very many things that are. And if you run a good set of straight-line bred cows, Apex Sim-Angus bulls will impact your program with more pounds to sell and good females to retain. You can find out more by going to their website, find videos and catalogs at apexcattle.com. Of course, that sale will be broadcast on cci.com starting at 12:30 Monday, January 27th, again at the Apex Cattle Sale headquarters in Dannenbrog, Nebraska. And in the cow business today, if you want efficiency and productivity in your cow herd, it's all about heterosis. Don't be in the business without it. Brett Crosby and Dave Voth joining us on the program today. And Dave, before we leave here today, I do want you to fill us in on what's going on with the upcoming Society for Range Management's annual convention that's going to be coming up in February. And I want you to fill us in on some of the highlights that will be taking place for that. But before we do that, Brett, I want to go back to you as we were talking about this price forecasting tool. Beef Basis is the terminology or the name of it. And now let's talk about the implementation, using it, and how it works.
Well, once we have price forecasts, we can then use those forecasts to help us make decisions. Any decision that affects the weight that our calves are going to be when we sell them, or the date that we sell them, is going to have an impact on the price that we receive. And that's where Beef Basis really adds value to an operation. And I'll give you a real life example. I grew up, we weaned our calves in October. We fed them until January, and we sold them at 800 pounds. That's what we did. And over the years, I've done a lot of trial and error. I've made probably every mistake you can probably make, but I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more mistakes I can make because I'm not dead yet. But since then, pushed like most people have, my calving date back into April, May. I wean my calves, but I don't put them in a feedlot because I've found that the benefit for me outweighs the cost by weaning them on pasture, letting them graze through the winter, and then selling them as grass cattle in late February, early March. And I have been able to make that decision more confidently because I can take my expected value of, say, a 700-pound steer in January versus a 600-pound steer at the end of February. So I know the value per head difference. Mm-hmm. And then I figure out, okay, well, what's it going to cost to get it to 7 by January versus letting it graze and only be 6 in late February. And those are the types of decisions that we can make if we can forecast the difference in the value per head, or i.e. the difference in price.
Mm-hmm. You talk about some different management decisions that we can look at. That was a great example, looking at, well, first of all, should you wean or should you sell off the calf? You can put in you could run an example on that. Then weaning, and if you are going to wean, how long should you go? How far could you? A lot of times anymore, we're looking at a 45-day wean. But what about a 60 or longer? And is it worth it if you're in an area that has the feed or the resources or the operation that can do that? So those are some analogies. I think it's great example. What happens? I think you could even go even further and say we're really looking at some big changes to our operation, and maybe instead of calving in February and March, we're going to look at a May-June calving situation. and run that scenario. Maybe it's not something you implement this year, but you start to begin to formulate, here's what it would do. Here's how it would affect our operation. That's some elements in this too, because then you can start to look, okay, here's our price that we would be looking at. Then additionally, we'd have to do our homework to know what we're saving on the backside too.
Right. And that's another great example. A lot of us here in the Northern Plains have moved our calving period back from, February. I can't believe I ever calved in February. I don't know what I was thinking, to April and May. And this gets into flexibility. The operation that I grew up on, that my dad owned, we had to calve early so we could get them off the fields in time to start farming. And so that's what we did. I don't have that constraint. So then that's where flexibility comes in. That's why I think flexibility is so important. Then I had to weigh the, no pun intended, the cost and benefit. If I'm calving in April and May, I'm going to have lighter calves if I sell at the same time. So say they come in, at 450 instead of 525, and I'm selling them right off the cow. How much is that really going to cost me? And the answer in this market is probably $80 a head. And so if I can forecast the difference between a 525 pound steer and a 475 or 450 pound steer, then I know that the difference is going to be $80 a head. Then I can use that $80 a head and say, well, am I going to save $80 a head in death loss, scour problems, etc.? And the answer for many of us has been yes.
Probably. Could be. You never know.
Well, those of us who have moved to that calving window have found that the benefits outweigh the lighter calf.
Yeah. So real quick, as we kind of wrap up this, because I want to make sure we have some room to talk a little bit about Society for Range Management's annual meeting coming up. Brett, with this website, the tool beefbasis.com, that's the website. How do you get started? I mean, and it's pretty simple. You can go right to that website. There's an easy way to kind of run a scenario, but there is a login information. How does that work? Is there a subscription, everything?
Okay, it's free to use, but you do have to log in to use it. You have to create a login because we have to control the bots.
Okay.
So in order to gain access to all the tools, you need to create a login. That's pretty simple to do. And then once you log in, you can access all of those things, all of those tools I was talking about. You can keep track of the number of steers and different weights that those steers will be on a page that will give you a projected gross income. Every time you log in, if you save that information, every time you log in, you can see, well, the market's changed. Now my net revenue or my gross revenue is expected to have changed by X. Mm-hmm. And so all you've got to do is log in and then just start surfing around and looking for the tools that help you. And I'm working with the Society for Range Management primarily because we have focused a lot on making good grazing decisions and making those based on a cost benefit analysis that requires us to figure out how it's going to affect the value of our cattle.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it will. And one of the things we didn't really touch on, but it gets back to the ultimate, it's helping us make management decisions. One of those that we hear a lot about is doing LRPs or PRF, those kinds of things. That's part of that decision because we're all in that same boat where we're just thinking, what do I need to do? What should I do? And without some forecasting information, it's really, I just feel like you're kind of shooting from the hip a bit on this deal rather than kind of pinpointing a bit. All right. So, Dave, before we head out here, Society for Range Management, your annual meeting coming up in Spokane, I believe, in February.
Spokane, Washington, February 9 through 13. This is our biggest event of the year, but Society for Range Management, SRM, that's about 2,500 people strong internationally. And it's really a group of people who have the same land work ethic. And so it's academics, producers, scientists. It's a pretty eclectic group who have one thing in common, and that is, how we manage land, specifically rangelands. The annual meeting it's just a huge event. A couple things I want to point out to this crowd. Mm-hmm. We have the Producers Forum, February 10th. And this year we have Alan Savory, Jonathan Lundgren, and Alejandro Carrillo going to come speak.
Okay.
I'm really excited about that one. We pulled a kind of an all-star cast together to come do a producer forum for us. That's February 10th. It's brought to you through a number of sponsors, but it's through SRM, and Good Grazing makes sense putting that together. Yeah, Society for Range Management is one of those things I was kind of intimidated by before I joined. It seemed like a little like a class above me, like not really for producers, but it's probably one of the best organizations I belong to in terms of understanding land management and building those relationships with other regulatory agencies and land managers. Yeah. I strongly encourage anybody who can show up. Spokane, Washington, February 9 through 13.
Go ahead, Brett.
I'll put in a plug here. I went to their annual meeting last year, Justin, and I wasn't a member of the Society for Range Management at the time. I've been to producer meetings all over the country for all kinds of commodities, and I think this was the best annual meeting I've ever been to. I mean, there were topics that ranged from cattle handling techniques to deep dive scientific research into plant morphology and growth. You have everyone from range scientists to just regular old cattle ranchers trying to figure things out. It's a great group because there is a very diverse group there that you get a lot of great questions. You learn a lot. I was so impressed. So I really encourage everyone to take a look at it.
You bet. All right. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. Real quick, that website, if you want to find out more on the Society for Range Management and their annual meeting coming up, you can go to rangelands.org. And the beef basis tool that Brett was talking about, that website is beefbasis.com. Go check them out. I think you'll find both things that we've talked about here today are going to be extremely useful as we look ahead into this next year. And guys, thanks for joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
You bet. Brett Crosby, Dave Voth joining us here on the program today. And as we head to break, coming up next, we're going to turn to the topic of heterosis. Dan Leo will be joining us here in just a few moments. We'll be back after this. Are you tired of putting the wear and tear on your ranch pickup or your good side-by-side out checking stock tanks or reservoirs? Or maybe it's just keeping an eye on a remote ranch location. When you stop and you think about it and you start to calculate the cost of your time, fuel, and miles on your vehicles, you're going to scare yourself. But there really is a very simple and a reassuring solution, and it's called Barn Owl. Barn Owl off-grid cameras and smart alerts provide you that assurance, and there's no question it is a time and a money saver. From anywhere at any time, no Wi-Fi or power needed. Build your off-grid camera system today at barnowl.tech. Real-time awareness starts here. Always know with Barn Owl. Well, heterosis is a terminology that for a lot of us we're very familiar with in the cow industry, but I think it warrants a discussion from time to time to talk about that, especially this time of the year where for some of us we're looking at either adding bulls to the bull battery or needing to replace some old genetics, and it is that time where you could potentially be making that decision about what's going to be the next influencer in your cattle herd. So joining us here today on the program to talk a little bit more about heterosis is Dan Leo with Apex Cattle out of Dannenbrog, Nebraska. And Dan, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Dan, I want to jump right into this subject of heterosis because I think in our industry, I wouldn't say there's really negative information about it. I think people understand what it does and its purpose. However, I think potentially some misunderstood information.
Yeah, I think that's right. In the past, we've had a lot of purebred operations, particularly in the cattle industry. Sometimes they don't reflect on the real value of heterosis. Some people think that really only pop is going to be through the gain and the performance that you get out of the calves. But the truth of it is, it really starts in the very beginning when those calves are born. They've got more vigor. They've obviously got more good growth, they're healthier than some of the straight bred counterparts. But probably one of the most important things, and it's been proven just right south of us there at the Beef Animal Research Center at Clay Center, Nebraska, that the crossbred cow obviously has heterosis within her genetic makeup, that those cows last longer and they're more fertile and they make more money for the owner.
Mm-hmm. I can think back over the years when we started seeing a little bit more crossbreeding taking place was that, well, it's more of a terminal concept. It's cattle that are going to be sold, and it's really not a maternal thing. And so we've seen really a lot of straight line breeding with that emphasis in mind. But the reality of it is, as you had said, from the research that we're looking at, and of course several years of this now, that crossbred cow, really, there's a lot of different attributes she's bringing in there, but it's predictable. The maternal traits are there, and that's what you're seeing as well.
That's exactly right. The cows are really fertile. And of course, over time, I've been in business over 50 years. And in the very beginning, we had a lot of straight bred cattle of different breeds. And of course, recently, straight bred Angus cows. And some of those cows have been very, very good to us. Obviously, it helped us create a base in our program. But I can say without a doubt that our Sim Angus cows last longer, they stay in better shape, their feet are better, and their udder quality is just excellent.
Mm-hmm. As you and I were talking before we started here today, I was telling you, as a cowman myself, one of the things that I'm looking for, and number one, I mentioned it briefly, is if you're not buying a bull that's going to improve genetics in your cow herd, you shouldn't really be in the cow business. When we start talking about improved genetics, boy, that's a whole nother world of a conversation, isn't it?
Well, it really is, and of course, from a seed stock supplier point of view, we put a lot of energy, we invest a lot in the right kind of genetics, and we just don't look at it just the next year or the next calf crop, but, down the road, 8, 10, 15 years, what it's not only going to do for us, but most importantly, what it does for our customers. So keeping things all in line with genomics is really, really important. It's a tool today that we have in the industry to work with. Decades ago, I wasn't there at the viable strength it is today. So, we can have calving ease, we can have growth, we can have strong maternal traits, and we can have carcass traits all in one.
Mm-hmm. Where have you seen in our industry in the last, as you've been in it for several years, in the last 15 to 20 years, where are you seeing the biggest push where we need to push our herd to that you feel is going to bring the money back to the cowman?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to have cattle that are fertile and have cattle that last longer in the program. And I'd say today that we have a very, very low fallout on fertility in our program. We expect our 2-year-old heifers to produce right with their mothers and their grandmothers in our program as far as the production in wean weights. And from a udder standpoint, is we don't have time for bad udders. We don't have time for any kind of fertility issues, because those things will really eat up in the profit really fast. And the other thing, I think that calving ease is just ultimately really important. And like in our particular operation, there was a day when we used to have more employees around this place when we ran probably less number of cows. And today, I'm 77 years old, so they don't get as much work out of me as they used to around this place. But I've got a good foreman in place, and I've got an Amish neighbor that helps out. And we have about 450 to 500 cows, which are part of those, of course, every year are replacement heifers. And we just don't put the labor into it that we did at one time.
Mm-hmm. Dan, when we start looking through sale catalogs, of course, where everybody's looking at EPD numbers, the different things that are there, I think for each operation, don't you feel like it's important for a guy to really, before they start looking through a lot of stuff, think first what you want to prove in your herd? Is that kind of number one to kind of get started, and then start matching that up to a bull that will do what you're wanting it to do, rather than grab a catalog and then kind of get caught up in the moment? But I think if we know first and foremost where we're wanting to go, that's kind of key to really, number one, improving genetics.
I think that's 100% right. Everybody has a little different program out there, and it's pretty easy to look at a catalog and find the individuals that rank in the top 1% for one trait or another.
Yeah.
But the fact of it is finding cattle that are really balanced, that are going to do lots of things really well is really important. And of course, one of the traits that's recognized in EPDs is docility. And docility, to me, is the easiest trait to call for in our cattle industry. I mean, honestly, we have EPDs and good accuracy, but my philosophy has been for a long time: if they don't behave, you get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And consequently, as our cow herd today is easily managed, and I think that that's something that's important. But as far as the genomics, we use 100K genomic testing, high density testing, on our complete operation. Every calf is tested. All of our cows, all of our sires all have DNA banked on them. And that information for us is vital, and we see our customers demanding it.
Mm-hmm. Dan, I'm going to ask you a question here that I'm just asking as a cow, we're a range outfit here, so we're not a purebred situation, but from a range cow man that's raising a commodity product out there, we're keeping our heifer replacements back and doing those kinds of things. When we start looking through these EPDs, I think there's a human nature in that the bigger is better, the highest rank is always better, and some of those kinds of things. What's your thoughts? I mean, what do you tell a cow man? Because in my mind, I'm looking at, okay, I want to be moderation in some of these things. For example, one of the things that was a big push many years ago was milk. Well, milk also makes a cow eat more grass. So there's a balance in there. So how do you tell a guy to read these EPDs in a way that fits? I mean, granted, you've got some sires in your catalog here that are going to top, that you're using that are going to be top 1% in some of these traits. So what do you tell a cow man that's raising a commodity product out there, yet at the same time keeping some replacements back when they look at these EPDs?
Well, every operation is different. And of course, every operation typically runs in different parts of the country. And the thing about high milk EPDs, I agree with you 100% that you have to be careful, because it's not only the cows eat more, but it affects their fertility. And the thing that's most important for the cow is to ever get bred and have it calf every year and have her calf for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And so as far as traits, I think that are vital and really important. I think it's really important in our industry that calving ease is paid attention to. So I think those numbers at birth, whether it be calving ease or calving ease direct, I think those are very, very important. I think in performance, in our Sim-Angus business, these cattle have a lot of good natural performance in them. And with heterosis, you get a big pop. And so it's not really necessary to have cattle that are in the top, 5, 10, 1% of the breed to get the kind of growth that's going to be a big increase from probably what you've experienced before. Mm-hmm. Of course, the carcass numbers, there's a lot of direction out there that's looking that way right now, and whether it be carcass weight or be marbling, ribeye. In our operation, we pay a lot of attention to marbling. We think it's really, really important that they're good tasting for our consumers, and we've proven that that's helped increase our demand because we've got a better product in the restaurant and the kitchen table across our country.
Dan, I want to talk about your sale coming up on the 27th of January, the end of this month. It's going to be there at your headquarters there at Dannenbrog, Nebraska, 27th of January. And I know you got some yearling bulls. You also got some older bulls in there. To kind of tell me what you got for this year's offering.
Well, we're selling about 140 bulls. About half of them are our age-advantaged 2-year-old bulls. Then the others are what we term as our new generation yearlings. They've kind of got some different new bloodlines or outcross that sometimes our customers want some new genetics. We have a lot of repeat customers in our program, and so we need to make sure that we've got new genetics that they can continually use back on daughters of bulls that they bought from us previously. Our bulls are developed in a way that we want them to stay sound for a long period of time. When people come through here, as they're older bulls, they can walk through the pens. The bulls are gentle. They're really good footed. Those things are really important to us. They're conditioned right. We sell cattle all over the United States. I think last year we sold in 18 states, from Florida to Idaho to West Virginia to Texas and North Dakota, everywhere in between. And so, having cattle that can handle fescue pasture, that can handle rough, cold climates, all those things are really important. But feed lakes are to us are really vital, no matter whether our yearlings or 2-year-old bulls.
Yeah. You hit over and over about the fact of longevity in our cows. We need it in our bulls as well, and I think that's important too. Let's talk about these bred heifers as well that you're going to be offering.
Yeah, we're selling about 118 head of bred heifers this year, and quite honestly, some females I really hate to even sell. But at my age, I don't need to keep as many replacements back as what I used to in the past. And genetics, they're going to make some fabulous cows in here. And when we talk about calving ease, a lot of them are AI to our Magnifique bull, who's a 211 API, which is very, very top 1%. He's also top 1% for worth weight in calving yeast. With moderate growth, the calving yeast ought to be really, really good on them females, and the maternal genetics behind them is outstanding.
You bet. And just a small offering of some fall calvers that look like, as well as some heifer calves. Is that new, the heifer calves?
Yeah, the heifer calves, it's the first time in 50 years I've ever sold the very front end heifers off this operation. But it's kind of a trend where people want to come in and buy those front end females to make donors out of the whatever. And so I basically opened the gate and we selected our very, very front end heifer calves for that. Of course, our fall pairs, they're all 3-in-1s. They're all AI backed Magnifiques. They're tremendous cows. Our one of them in there actually produced our top selling our sale last year. And so it's going to be a really good opportunity for people.
Well, Dan, I know the sale, like I said before, it's going to be Monday, January 27th at 12:30. That would be Central Time, lunch ahead of that. Anything else before we head out here today you want to talk about?
Well, make sure that you go to our website, check out our online catalog, request a catalog. If you want one in your hand, we can sure get it to you by priority mail. Check out the videos. They've got a lot of story there. You can see the cattle, see how well they're conditioned, how properly they're conditioned. I guess that's a big thing.
You bet. And, of course, you can catch this sale on cci.live. cci.live is where you can bid online and watch that sale on the 27th of January. Apex Cattle, America's Heterosis headquarters. Dan Leo joining us here today. Dan, thanks for being here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Appreciate it. And thanks to you for all you do for our industry, Justin.
You bet. Dan Leo joining us here on the program today with Apex Cattle. A good discussion here ahead of this busy bull buying season that's going to start now all through the next couple of months into April practically, and shoot even into May for some of those headed to grass pasture bull sales. But nevertheless, some great discussion as we talked about heterosis and also just some other common sense things that Dan shared with us that I think is relevant as we begin that process of looking at the next genetics that's going to be the influencer in our cow herd. Well, coming up after the break, the Captain Tim O'Byrne, editor of Working Ranch Magazine, will be in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents, and we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at that long-term weather.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo rain gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land, especially those folks in the Midwest that were caught up in that massive winter storm. I did a Facebook post last Sunday, which I usually don't on a Sunday, but I did. I said, hey, I want to check in on you folks, see how you're making out. Justin, I cannot be prouder of our good beef cattle ranchers out there. They're out there, man, taking care of it no matter how. Whatever you got to do, you get her done. And God bless you folks. And I got a text here from my old buddy Bob Tallman. Tim, your January issue of the magazine is over the top. Your article on the WRCA finals in Amarillo was awesome. That's a great event. I've announced it for 10 years, and it was really good. So, folks, check it out. It's on page 46 of the Jan-Feb 2025 issue. Weekend Rodeo, a great story by Shea Williams, the 29th World Championship Ranch Rodeo. And they also did a nice tribute to a wonderful cow gal, Linda Mitchell Davis, who we all know from the CS there in New Mexico. Did a beautiful tribute to her. We've got that featured on page 49. She was such a good old cow gal. I'll tell you what, she was quiet and knew cows and horses in the country, and she's just a wonderful human being. So check it out. And Justin, you must be thinking about packing your bags for NCBA because we're fixing to head on over there here in a couple of 3 weeks. So we'll see you there. Travel safe. And folks, have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thanks, Captain. Yeah, it is the season for national conventions across the country. As the captain was saying, we will be down in San Antonio February 4th through the 6th for the 2025 Cattle Convention. Now, ahead of that, backing up into the end of January through 24th through the 29th, American Farm Bureau Federation will also be meeting in San Antonio, Texas. And as we heard earlier, Dave Voss telling us about the Society for Range Management having their 25th annual meeting in Spokane. That's February 9th through the 13th. And looking clear out into March, National Farmers Union will be meeting in Oklahoma City. Well, let's turn now and take a look at our long-term weather. Standing by is meteorologist Don Day. Don, boy, it's been a very interesting January already with what we saw going on in California last week with the fires to the extreme weather that really has been in different parts of the country. And winter is here. It is definitely here and making its mark. And it sounds like as we look about a week out from now, we could really see some pretty severe weather across a good portion of the country.
Yeah, if you remove, if we just take out the California fires and just talk about, we've had two major winter events in the nation since the first of the year. We had that go through the middle part of the country last week, and then we just recently saw this big snow and ice storm go across the southern plains to the Carolinas with freezing temperatures all the way to the Gulf Coast. And it's still, we're not even halfway into the month yet. Mm-hmm. And so what we do see developing is that we are going to see sort of a readjustment for the month of December and for beginning of January. The coldest temperatures have been east of the Rockies into the plains and the Great Lakes and the Northeast. It's looking more and more likely that starting with this upcoming weekend and into the third full week and into the fourth week of January, parts of the western United States that haven't had any really severe cold yet have a real chance of seeing it. And it might be cold that gets all the way to the Pacific coast, depending on how far west the surge goes. And we could see the cold air go all the way into Texas again. And it is certainly looking like if there's going to be a January thaw, it'll be at the end of the month on the East Coast. A lot of the central and western United States is going to have a very cold January.
Mm-hmm. So are we going to see much moisture in these storms that are coming, or is it going to be just cold weather?
Well, it's going to be cold, and there's certainly going to be some moisture. Now, in terms of a lot of water in the snow, you don't tend to see that in January episodes in early February, but we will see some needed precipitation, I think, finally get into the parts of the southwest United States. Arizona, parts of New Mexico, and parts of the Great Basin, including Southern California, have gone a good 6 weeks or more without any significant moisture. I do see at the end of the month into early February, those parts that are in the southwest United States finally getting into some precipitation in the form of snow in the mountains and rain and snow down low. I think the central and northern Rockies, there's a real opportunity here for Idaho, Montana, a good portion of Wyoming, and the western Dakotas to have above average snowfall in the next 6 weeks. Okay. And that's an area I think that is likely going to be the most snow covered.
Okay. All right. Well, gives us fair warning as we look ahead. Thanks for joining us here today on the program.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Meteorologist Don Day joining us with a look at that long-term weather and through this very up and down season of weather. If you would like to stay informed of what is going on each and every morning, you can go to his website at dayweather.com, and there is a link to his YouTube channel. Just a couple things here as the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine is out. And if you don't have it, probably means you don't have a subscription. You can get started by going to the website at workingranchmag.com. But it's full, again, this issue of a lot of great articles, story, information. Now, I had a guy call me the other day out of Chamberlain, South Dakota, and he said one of the parts that he likes is that back part, the buyer's corral. I kind of like looking through that too, seeing all the different products out there. But check out the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine. Now, coming up next week, Trey Wasserberger with Sustainable Beef LLC will be joining us. They're about 90 days from cutting the ribbon on getting that beef new packing plant started up in North Platte, Nebraska. Trey will give us an update on how things are progressing on that. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. If you'd like to get a hold of me, my email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. And if you're listening on a podcast, do us a favor, leave us a comment or a rating. I'm Justin Justin Mills. And until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.